2 or 3 days. So let's
Excellent.
get ready to rock. We're going to hit record in three, two. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. I love talking to authors because they have the courage to take their thoughts, their stories, their lessons, put it down in a book, share it with the many, ultimately changing their legacy and destiny in the process. If you're out there and you're an entrepreneur, I recommend you write a book. What happens when you write a book is just incredible. The clarity, the ability to give back, but also to define yourself and your path. And so if you're looking to write a book out there, check out dreamstarterspublishing.com. We can help you out with wherever you're at in the process. And if you have a book that's already done, check out my other company, bookmarketingcrm.com. You can use the book to generate leads for your business, grow multiple revenue streams. Anyways, if you're listening to this podcast, most likely you're an entrepreneur and you're all about financial freedom, creating wealth. Maybe you have a startup, or maybe you are trying to patent something, or maybe you just want to understand business accounting, or whatever it is. This next guest is for you because he wrote over, I believe the number is 50 books, and we could talk about anything entrepreneurial with him. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to John Cousins. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Oh, thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate it.
And
Yeah.
usually
Oh,
what's that?
I was just gonna. My one thought, as you were saying, encouraging people to write a book. I think that's a great idea. Just as a start off, I've heard a quote recently that said, "If you're overthinking, write. If you're underthinking, read." And so, getting that balance, when there's so many ideas pumping around in your head, put them down on paper. It clarifies your thoughts. So, writing is so important.
Wow, I'm going to use that, man. I like that because if you're overthinking, you basically you have to take what's going on in your brain and make sense of it. And the way you do
Right.
that is you make it tangible. And if you're
Right.
underthinking, if you're not thinking high enough, well, you just need input, right? It's always about the law of action and reaction, right? You always focus on what you could put in order for you to get out.
Right, exactly. And yeah, so I'm glad you like that quote because I found that really powerful for me, and I
Oh,
certainly.
I'm definitely going to share that on social media. Thanks for that. And usually I promote one book for one of our guests, but you have a book called The Way to Wealth, Marketing 2.0, Financial Literacy, Corporate Finance, Learn Accounting Fast. That's how I found you,
Oh,
managing and leading organizations and people. So let's just start off with the genesis of you, John Cousins. Where do you come from? What made you fall in love with, number one, creating businesses or creating cash flow or revenue, and then becoming a writer of 50 books? So give us the rundown.
well, yeah, I was born in a small town. No, the my I originally I was gravitated towards technology, and I studied engineering in college, and I actually got really interested in audio and rock and roll recording studios, and being a rock musician and stuff. That's really what I wanted to do. So I studied electronics, and I studied audio engineering and electronic music. And basically, what I did, I snuck into a job at this place. It was a synthesizer company in Boston. I was going to school in Boston, and they made electronic synthesizers, the musical instruments. And I worked there, and then I started going back to school at night at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, studying electronics. They had a program there for what they call tube jockeys, guys that had grown up, and with tube electronics, and now everything was moving to semiconductors, and so they had a program, and I went through that, and that's how I kind of got involved with electronics and recording and audio. And then I then I worked with Bob Moog on a big synthesizer that he put in. Moog synthesizers was big at the time. Then I went to New York and worked in all these famous recording studios. And from there, I went to work at a company called Ampex out in Redwood City, California, in Silicon Valley, early Silicon Valley company. And they made all the hardware, the recording equipment for the multi-track audio tape players and video equipment. And they trained me up in video. And then the networks, I worked out of New York, servicing as a marketing, a technical marketing guy, selling this stuff. And then the networks would poach Ampex employees once they got trained up to come and be their guys, their engineers. So that's what happened with me. I got a job at ABC Television, and I worked there for a decade in what was called broadcast engineering and operations, designing and building facilities for the network, putting on big remotes and stuff like that, and building up more and more, electronics and these applications. And a lot of what I was doing, our customers were sports and news. Rune Arledge was the ultimate boss of that at that time, Wide World of Sports. And so they would always be coming to us engineers and saying, and we'd go out in the field and see how they were working. They would want to do new state-of-the-art things. So our job was to work with companies and develop new products and then implement them for the network. So we'd have an edge with better looking or whatever, more interesting shows to put on. And I started thinking about that. I was like, I'd love to do that, like run my own company and take some technical ideas and turn them into products and sell them. So then I decided to do that. I really had to go back to business school. So I bailed out of ABC after a decade and went to the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania and got my MBA, Master of Business Administration. And then when I came out of there, started building companies and doing all kinds, taking technical ideas, making them into companies, getting investors, getting intellectual property, get patents and things like that, and putting all this stuff together, trying to, market and sell things to people, marketing. And that's basically what I did. I ended up taking two companies public. And then I worked as a public company CFO and CEO for 15 years. And during that time, I also started teaching. My sister was teaching finance at a university, and I thought, in her spare time, she was working for a big company. I thought that's really cool, what you're doing. So I started looking around, and then I started getting some teaching assignments at various universities and all. And that's when I really discovered, after banging around with entrepreneurship and tech for, a decade or more, that all the stuff they were teaching in those universities, all the textbooks were like 3 inches thick and incredibly boring. And who the heck wants to read that? And I started thinking, I need to boil this down to here is the essential information for my students because they were blinded by too much information. It was like they couldn't see the forest of the trees in any of these subjects. I just put up tell them on the whiteboard, okay, what's on a balance sheet? And they'd panic and start yelling out words that they had heard like assets, credits, debits, not having a clue really what it all meant. And I was like, wait a minute, here I give them a context and I started seeing these light bulbs go off. And I literally had students saying like, I've taken 5 accounting courses. This is the first time I really understand what the heck is going on after like a half an hour, so it really started to dawn on me that there was, that I could, service people by giving them that kind of information. And it started out with like slide decks and, little white papers, and then I build it up gradually into books. And that's basically where I came from, how I got to this place. And then at the same time, this convergence of technology, like what we're doing right now, it's remarkable. You can talk to people all over the world and archive things. So it's asynchronous. They can listen to it live or they can listen to it later. And same thing in publishing, Amazon came along and suddenly you could have all these, ways to publish and just upload a Word file and, away you go. So I started thinking that was a way to sort of disseminate some of my material. And then I started making courses too, recording my courses and putting my courses online too. So that's basically how I got from here to there.
Man, you
That's
have
the
books.
long story.
You have books on everything, including self-actualization. So let's get to that in a bit. But before we get started with that one, let's get to one that really caught my eye while I'm going through your list of books. It's really intense. Startup
Thanks.
Entrepreneurial Primer. Okay. I'm sure people could pick up this book and get into the details. But what would be, because I really want to bounce around and maybe do things differently on this podcast, but what is one, two, or three takeaways from that book that you could share with our audience when it comes to the startup world? Now, you said that you went from basically the corporate world into the startup world. And I'm assuming maybe that was when you really self-actualized, right? Because I always look at entrepreneurship as a personal development journey disguised as a business journey. So when you entered that world, it's almost like you were in the unfamiliar world, I guess you could say. And that's whenever you were tested, you were tried, and therefore you met your mentors, your allies, and maybe you found yourself in the process. So let's start off with the startup book and maybe a takeaway or two from there.
And that's an excellent way of thinking about it, Mike. That's absolutely true. I think that as we go, I mean, that's ultimately our journey, right, is to self-actualize, to, the things that we're interested in, and the more freedom we have to pursue the things we're interested in, the more we find out about ourselves.
Yes.
We reveal ourselves to ourselves by just pursuing whatever has a slight interest for us. And so, yeah, definitely, the entrepreneurial route is a trial by fire. There's nobody left to, responsibility but yourself for whatever happens. You can't blame it on your boss is a jerk or this or that, or, and and so it's a really, but it's also so freeing, and you're actually getting the rewards, of the value you create. Anytime you work for a company, I mean, basically the premise of capitalism and a job is that you are creating more value than you are receiving. Otherwise, no one would hire you.
Yep.
You create some kind of value, they pay you amount that's less than your value, and they get that surplus value, and that's what makes the corporation function. Any employee, for any employee. So to capture that excess surplus value that you are actually creating, you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to be your own person. And so that's the idea. And I just love, and the fact now that we have so many technologies that all the barriers to entry have really been reduced
Yes.
to be an entrepreneur. You can be it used to be maybe you need 20 guys with computers, and that was a pretty big leap. Now, one person, the whole idea of solopreneur, where you could do it yourself, is really a radical idea, but something that we can do. And that's what I do. I say a lot of times now, it's just me and the robots. Everything I do is automated and disseminated around the world. I mean, you can take a picture on your phone, pop it up to Instagram or whatever, and anybody can see it anywhere. And that's relatively new. It used to be you'd take a picture, you'd have to go get the film developed, you'd have one copy that you could share with people, but you couldn't share with, now you can make infinite amount of copies and they're relatively costless, right? A download of a video, you know, 10 people can download this podcast, or 1 million people can download it, and it's not going to cost you any more to make copies of it. So that's we're living in a world now where all of these things are available to us, and to take advantage. So we're living at this lucky time. It behooves us to take advantage of that and explore it. We can market, we can get, create awareness campaigns very easily for ourselves through, different channels like YouTube or Facebook or whatever, social media or all kinds of things, and get people aware of what we're doing, drive them through a funnel with some conversion events, give them some, some free thing that then they exchange for their email, and then cultivate them as customers over email, give them lots of valuable stuff. And then hopefully at some point they buy something for you. And none of that stuff was available to us to do 20, 30 years ago, So it's a wonderful time to think about being an entrepreneur. And so that's the first thing, is this is a great time to be alive. And we have all these and the technologies are just going to get better. Now we have AI and things where we can do all kinds of generative content and help us and research whatever we want. And so these power tools are just going to get more powerful, and the more that we use them, the better we get at, more facility we get in using them, the more powerful we become, and the more we can help other people. Because at the end of the day, the big thing about being an entrepreneur, I'd say, first of all, it's a great time to be doing it. Second is create value for people, give them something interesting that they didn't know before, something that has value for their lives. And that's, I think what we all try to do is think that way, that what can we give that would make a benefit to all of our customers and audiences and things. So that's the second thing, is you got to create value, and you got to think in those kind of terms. And I've seen a lot of people that are very closed about their entrepreneurial journey. Like, I can't share this idea because I haven't patented it yet. And what if somebody steals it from me and all? And that type of, sort of closeness is counterproductive to what they want to do. It's more like share everything. And if people want to repurpose it and use it a little bit, that's fine. But ultimately, you're going to be creating value, and you're going to reap the rewards of that. So those two things. And then there's a number of great sort of technical tools kits that's been put together to help people go systematically, because I'm an engineer, I like to think in systems, through the entrepreneurial process. And like the lean startup and those type of ideas. And there's one by a guy named Osterwalder called the entrepreneurial canvas, the startup canvas, and it's nine tiles, and you fill them all in. On one side is all the internal stuff, and then all the stuff on the outside is the extra, the markets and stuff, and how you're going to make things, and then expensive. And it's a great thing to sketch out. You can fill that out. The business model canvas is called. And I would suggest to anybody, just go online and download you can put in business model canvas and download an image from Google or look at it. And for sketching out any idea you have in 9 tiles, you can sketch out your idea and see if it sort of holds up to that validation, initial validation. And so the third thing I would say is, it's a great time, create value. And then what you want to do is you have to make product market fit. You have to have whatever you're going to sell, you have to find a market for that where people are convinced that it's good enough that they're willing to pay for it. And that means that you have to think that they're going to use their money, someone's going to use their money. Of all the things that they could use their money for, your value proposition is the most important thing to them at that moment, that they're actually going to part with their hard-earned money to buy your product or service. And so that's a tough task, a tough bar to reach. People can do lots of other things, lots of substitute things they're going to do yours. So product market fit. And that's when you really know you have something. When people are starting to buy it, they'll buy it even if it's in a kludgy, less than perfect form, because they just love what you're doing. And then you can iterate and make it better and better and refine it as you go along. But once you have that product or service and that market, people that are interested in doing it, then you really have something that you can run with. And
Beautiful.
until then, you really don't have much, but it's fun to, just try to get to that point.
When it comes to that baptism by fire that you expressed before, I do think that maybe you figured out, you're an engineer, so you probably already knew yourself, but did you learn anything about, and this kind of ties in with the other book, but how you learn? Me personally, I know this is crazy, but I learn from screwing up, right? I have to try it, I have to do it, I have to see it, and then I'm got it. Okay, I need to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this better? Me, eh, me going through it and being able to kind of take the hits, it reinforces the lesson. So I need to go through it. And I know that the really smart people out there, like Elon Musk, probably can avoid many mistakes by reading many different books and then doing it without running into those problems. Even though they run into problems, they still kind of save a lot of time. So I figured out how I learned. And then I just realized, well, perfection is subjective. As long as I get started, I know I have the stick to itiveness, the grit, the ability to just push through and adapt and change and then fix myself and the solutions. That's how I learn. And you talk about in your book, I guess, learning how to learn to be a learning ninja. I think there are studies that show maybe 40% learn through seeing it, 40% learn from hearing it, 20% learn from actually doing it, right? So, like kinesthetics, I think is what it is. So, anything that you could share with us in order to maybe expedite the learning process?
That's excellent. And you're right on, Mike. Yeah, there's many ways to learn and many different formats we can. And I think a multimodal approach where you try to learn in all these different ways, it helps to make it stick. Another important way to learn that Richard Feynman, the great physicist, said is, you learn by teaching. Once you go through and you
Oh, there you
sort of
go.
know
Yeah.
something, you try to explain it to somebody, and try to explain it to a fifth grader or something, where so you have to get very, very clear and concise, and you can't use a lot of fancy buzzwords. Those things are very important. So, right, how we learn and how it sticks, and certainly the big way is by doing. And I'm a big proponent of ready, fire, aim instead of ready,
I
aim.
love that phrase. Yeah. I've seen
Do
it.
it,
That was in
and
your
then
book, by the way. You have that in your accounting book. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the way to learn. You're right, is you just start doing it. And you don't need to see the whole staircase as long as you see the next step, what you need to do, and you just keep going along, like you say, and use your intuition and use your perseverance, your grit to just stick with it and not be afraid. I mean, there's the whole idea of failure. That's something I think in Silicon Valley and entrepreneurship, they've sort of spun that idea a little bit different, like and say like, fail fast, fail forward, fail better, learn. They're not really failures in a way. They're only failures if you stop.
Bingo.
It's not a failure if you say, what did I learn from this? Like you say, that self-awareness. What did I do wrong, or what could I have done differently? Like Edison said, I didn't fail making a light bulb, 10,000 times. I learned how not to make it 10,000 times, and you really need to go through and make those experiments. There's experiments. Some of them work, some of them don't. And sort of just refining things. Sometimes it's like a completely different thing, and sometimes it's maybe just a little incremental change that makes all the difference. We're trying to crack the code, right, and figure out what works and what doesn't. So each time we do something, it's an experiment, and we make a hypothesis beforehand, right? Like this is what we think is going to happen. And then it never really turns out the way we think it's going to happen. And that gap between what we thought was going to happen when we did it and what did happen, then we move forward with that as a learning type of moment. And so if you take it like that, then it gets more exciting, and you get more loose with making the experiments, making the things that could fail. Because at the end of the day, and you have to look at what the risks are too. It's risk management. You don't go out and say, I'm going to plunk down $1 million on red on this roulette wheel, and if I fail, if I lose all that money. You do things that where the consequences for the failure may be very limited. Maybe you lose a little face, whatever, big deal. People do that all the time. And in other cultures, that's a big deal, that you do not want to lose face. Like, oh, I tried this thing and it didn't work. I'm a buffoon. And if you think of it that way, you're never going to get too far in the world, So you have to just think, hey, on to the next thing before you can even think about what, and don't ruminate on what was wrong about it. What did you learn from it? And then boom, right into the next iteration, the next cycle of it.
Well, you touched on the act of teaching really reinforces the learning curve, I guess, because as you take in information, you might think you have it, right? But if you try to communicate to someone else, then you'll realize either you have it or you don't. And when you do it consistently and you increase that repetition, it's almost like you take something that's 20 words down to 15, down to 10, down to 5, and that's the art. Like if you can communicate something to somebody in as few as words as possible, then you really understand it, right? And by doing that over and over and over, individuals look at you with way more, I guess you could say, in way more of a viewpoint of authority, right? You understand it more than the next person because you're able to articulate it in such a clear manner. And
Right.
Jordan Peterson has a great way of saying it, that your level of income is directly related to how well you articulate your solutions. So if you want to understand something, start teaching it in books, on podcasts, on stages.
Yeah.
And when you were going through this book, or maybe your first book, did you realize that the more you put your thoughts down on a piece of paper, the more you were able to maybe understand it so you can actually become a better entrepreneur, to become a better leader? Did you notice that too?
Absolutely, absolutely. And like you say, writing and teaching it, is writing is a very safe way to teach it, because once you start writing, you see where the gaps are, and then you
Yeah.
can go back and say, I don't really understand this that well. Let me go, research that a little bit more and think about it a little bit more. And that's why I think writing it's a very painful process in a way, because you think you understand. I mean, I think I understand something, and then I go to write it, and I think we've all had that experience, and all of a sudden it's like, the words aren't, it doesn't come out, in this clear way I think I have it in my mind, because I really don't know it that well, and it's cloudy. And I think Hemingway said or something, every first draft is just junk, and then you get it down on paper, and then you refine it and you refine it and you refine it, like you say, you make it smaller and smaller, more concise, so that you actually get that clarity. And you have to be comfortable with those first couple of drafts are not going to be that great. But if you keep at it and keep going back over it, Truman, when he was president, it finally, Roosevelt was president, and the atomic bomb, that whole big project, and it was secret to even Truman, who was the vice president. And then Leslie Groves, who was the military manager, all that, came in to brief the new president on the atomic bomb thing after Roosevelt had died and Truman became president. and he had this big, pamphlet of here's the atomic bomb project, and because it was super complicated, all this, refining uranium and all this kind of, and Truman handed it back to him and said, "Give me a one page. I need a one-page brief on this. I can't find this whole thing." And he said, "I can't possibly give you a one-page brief on this whole immense project." And Truman bluntly said to Leslie Groves, General Groves, if you can't put that down in one page, you don't really understand it.
Oh
And
man.
he came back and gave him a one pager on it, but it took him a long time. Goethe said one time he wrote this lengthy letter to a friend, and he said, "I apologize for the length of this letter. I didn't have time to write you a short one because it'd take him so much longer to write to pare it
It's
down."
so brilliant, by the way, because people think that a 45-minute to a 60-minute speech, more information is going to be shared. Well, when it comes to attention span, that's not the case. But also, if you could say it in 5 or 10 minutes, you understand it, right? And you're cutting out all the fluff. That is such a great way of put it. Like it takes you way longer, and people think that if they write a 500-page book, that's better. No, and I think you adopted this. You write shorter books, right? Shorter books, clear, punch to the face of what it's about, how it can help you, and therefore people can grasp it. And it makes me think about there's the jujitsu coaches out there. They will
Mhm.
always train their students. The high level coaches will train their students, and they want their students to come back the next day and teach it back to them. And the
Mhm.
moment you start to realize that it's not all about all of the words, it's about the results, you really streamline everything. And I think your audience respects it more, right? Your clients respect it more. And if it's like Steve Jobs was all about the design and keeping things simple and clean. I remember him saying, I think it was in a book or whether it was on an interview, anybody can make a computer complicated. It takes a
Right.
real genius to bring it down to simple terms and simple uh, applications.
And that's so true. Right. Making it simple is really, really challenging. And that is my what I aspire to, is to make things simple and clear. And I think, like you said, it's respecting your audience's time. Like instead of giving them 500 pages, give them 30 pages, that boils all that down. And that's my company is called MBA ASAP, as soon as possible. I just wanted to just codify this information, boil it down, distill it into its essence, the most important things. And once you get that, then you have a context too to maybe put in more details or more nuance and things like that. But unless you have a really solid core idea about what the essentials are, is essentialism. That's a big part of it. Essentialism, that paring it down to what's really important, and that's a real challenge. And I think it shows a respect for the audience. You just want to give it to them. Don't make them spend 20 hours. Give it to them in an hour or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the most powerful speeches are written at, or the most popular speeches are written about a 13 to 14-year-old level. And it's
Hmm.
because the average person understands it, right? And so individuals who use words that are way too big for the common man,
Yeah.
or they use too many words, it actually does a disservice to their brand and to their messaging. So I think that's on point with what you're saying there. But you do have a book called The Millionaire Mindset. I always talk, if you listen to this podcast, I talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, how that's
Yeah.
the
I saw
book
it
that
back
really
there. That's a great book.
changed my life. I was 22 years old and I was
Me
never the
too.
same. That's
Me
why I
too.
keep it behind me. You too?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Just that whole idea about buying income producing assets and focusing on that. That really was that book's a great eye opener, and it's done in sort of that narrative form where it's easy to digest and to understand these ideas. Yeah, it had a profound impact on me. Absolutely, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the book that gave me the millionaire mindset, if you will, of understanding how you have to go from the left side of the quadrant to the right side, the cash flow quadrant, from going from employee to self-employed owner to a business owner to investor. And I just realized now that everything the school system teaches is not about creating wealth, it's about creating workers. It all goes back to Rockefeller and how it all began. So the millionaire mindset, if somebody picked that book up, what is one or two takeaways that you would share?
Well, gosh, it's just what you basically just said. It's that And that's been my arc from going from engineer working for other companies, to entrepreneur to investor. And that's a lot of what I do now is investing. And that's essentially it, is to get yourself out of debt, get yourself into a place where you're saving money and then putting that money to work through investing. And we're living in an incredible time where you can invest in the stock market. It's only been maybe the last 5 years, even, or 10 years at the most, that Robinhood basically started it, where they had no brokerage fees for buying stocks. And then all the other companies had Schwab and all the other ones had to come along and say, okay, no more brokerage fees. When I was growing up, a brokerage fee, it would cost you $30 to place an order for stock. So you couldn't buy, you'd have to buy like 1,000. If you bought $1,000 worth of stock, the fee would still be 3%. So right off the bat, you're taking a 3% haircut. Now you can buy one share at $9 of some stock and you pay nothing. So you can start small and start building up, this your assets. And as you do that, you're creating wealth. And that's the millionaire mindset to me, is starting to think about creating wealth, getting out of the debt and wage slavery of working for a company, taking on a mortgage, taking on a car loan. That's one of the key things, is never put debt on a depreciating asset like a car. You really want to pay cash for your car. So because the car goes down in value so fast and the debt stays about the same. Debt on a house, maybe, because houses tend to appreciate, might be a better deal, but watching really how you do consumer debt and staying away from credit card debt. When you have it, and we all do, then you have to start thinking, well, how am I going to get out of this hole? And the big thing is, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, and so start to turn that around and get to that point where you're actually on the net plus side of your money. And in that book too, like rental properties, stocks that have, dividends, all those kind of income producing assets that are throwing off cash for you.
Yep.
That's the key. And if you can get to a place where your assets and the cash they're throwing off each month is enough to pay all your bills, then that's when you are wealthy. And that's the key, is to, there's people that make $1 million a year, but they have a house in the Hamptons, they have a yacht, whatever, and they're spending $1.2 million a year. They're poor. The person that makes 40 grand a year and they live on 35 grand a year, they're wealthy. That's the difference, and so that's the key, is to develop and create wealth. And now we can do it with the stock market. I mean, to me, it's a mind blower that we're allowed, everybody, to just invest in the stock market. You open a Robinhood account, you open a Schwab account, you can start putting some money in there and buying stocks that you like, Facebook or a Google or, Boeing, whatever it is. And you would think that that would be something that would be really held tightly by some oligarchy that was, holding on to the wealth, and that they wouldn't allow us regular people to get in and do this. But it's not the case. It's completely democratized. So to not take advantage of that is really doing a disservice to ourselves, I think, because it's amazing that we have that available to us. And once again, it's been an innovation that there's no more commissions in brokerage accounts in the last 10 years, maybe less, probably last 5 years. So, when you see these kind of opportunities arise, it really, it behooves us to take advantage of them.
Yeah, and I think that are you familiar with what's happening today and yesterday in regards to GameStop and AMC?
Well, I just watched that movie
Dumb
on that,
money.
and yeah, the kitty, the
Roaring
fella.
Kitty. Roaring Kitty.
Yeah. Yeah. And he came back on, and all of a sudden the stock's going. And I love that idea that, these hedge funds took it in the shorts, kind of, because all these people got together through Reddit or whatever and started, crowdsourcing the stock and put a short squeeze on those guys. That was really an incredible moment. Yeah. But those kind of things where people
It's
can,
happening today, by the way. Do you know that? They did it again yesterday and today.
yeah.
There was a major short, and from what I understand, I was at 10 a.m. is when I last looked at it. There was a $2 billion transfer already today.
That is amazing. And that must make those bigwig guys sweat. And that's so much fun, satisfying for, us little guys who are just like, we just want to, get it. and to all that's a brand new phenomenon that came through, yeah, in the last few years through Reddit and through these buying these stocks and looking for those short positions and then attacking them in a way. And now the short sellers, there's a big argument that they do provide a good service as far as maybe unveiling companies that are fraudulent or something, and so they're shorting them and that. But in a lot of these cases, they're just making a self-fulfilling prophecy by they short it and then the stock goes down and then they capitalize on it.
Bingo.
So
Yeah.
this is a way for, again, it's a democratization of this whole process and taking it away, wresting it from this oligopoly, a few people that control it and giving it to everybody. And so I love that, spreading the wealth and stuff. And it's remarkable. Yeah, it's really cool.
So I think, and maybe you agree with me on this, but I think the key to life is to think like an entrepreneur. And whether you do the stock market or do you do real estate or you do crypto, you got to do something. But
Yeah.
what's happening is that there's chaos around us at all times. And usually where there's chaos, there's opportunity, or maybe it's wherever
Volatility.
there's, yeah.
Yep.
So if you think like an entrepreneur, you can jump on that train when it comes to, oh, there's a GameStop meme craze. Okay, so let me get involved and let me profit from it. You start to become financially independent, right? And
Yeah.
therefore that one source of income, that one revenue stream that you get from that job that you hate, all of a sudden becomes, oh, I'm not so scared about losing my job, because if I think like an entrepreneur, I can make money here, make money here, make money here. And all of a sudden you become extremely valuable to the marketplace because you become very in tune with what's happening. And so whether you listen to us or not, guys, that they're listening to this podcast, think like an entrepreneur and watch what happens. You start to pick up on the bullshit that's in the media. You start to become more self-aware, and you do lead to self-actualization. And that's what leads me to my next point here. Thinking like an entrepreneur does lead to self-actualization. So in your book, I'm so fascinated with this. The Maslow's hierarchy of value. Once you have your food and your shelter and maybe, some a network, the last piece of it all is to really know yourself. And once you know yourself, all of the other stuff seems to kind of fall in line. So tell me about this if you can.
Well, and that's really true. And that comes, like you say, and another investment that I would add to that, just going back a little bit, you said, all those things, crypto, real estate, rental properties, or the stock market. Another one is just developing a side hustle. That
Bingo. That's
entrepreneurial way where you don't quit your job, maybe, but you start, a couple hours a night or something like that, or in the morning, on the weekends, and you develop this side hustle that then becomes another income stream. And then, like you say, you have the average millionaire has 7 income streams. So that's the key. They have all these different revenue sources that are coming in. So you're not that even when you have a company, one of the key things is you don't want to have just one giant customer. You want to have a distributed revenue stream, so you're not at risk for if one customer goes away or one product fails. You want to have multiple products and multiple services so that that's what Amazon kind of is like all these tributaries coming together and building a giant river. Amazon, that was the whole metaphor behind that name, and it's really is true. And then when you have that safety net, like you say, I know how to do this. I'm actually having some income, so it wouldn't be, oh my God, if my boss fires me, I'm going to be, living on the street next week. So I have to, kiss her butt all the time or whatever. So, you start to live more gracefully and more with more poise because you're more confident about your powers, your abilities, your capabilities. You have more agency in the world, and you have this safety net so that opens up where you're suddenly heads up, like you say, and then looking around. What are more opportunities? Where are things that I can deploy my resources and my capabilities in ways that will be fruitful for me and others? And that's really self-actualization is I think is that discovery process of how can I help others? What do I have that I'm doing that I'm good at or that I'm interested in that will be of interest to others, then it can help them, on their journey, whatever it is. And so I think that's it's really and even after that, at the top of the Maslow's pyramid is self-actualization. But Alan de Botton he's a philosopher, a great guy, did a speech on that and said there's another transcendence of that, into helping others, is really the thing. You want to understand yourself, and that's really key. But then how do you go out and then make that into something that can transcend yourself and actually be a benefit to the world at large, or a group of people or whatever it is, and really be helpful, try to be helpful.
I
And
mean,
whether it's inspiration or practical stuff.
it's so rare for somebody to self-actualize. I mean, that's what makes it so valuable, right? Because of groupthink mentality, but everybody's
Yeah,
kind of following maybe the recipes of others. And if you know yourself, you know who you want to team up with, you know where you want to go. And there are people out there who just make a killing in certain businesses that I want nothing to be a part of. I don't want to be in that world, right? And if I didn't know myself, I'd be like, wow, there's money there. They're doing really well. They seem happy. Let me just follow. And if you get that result, that $1 million or that car, but you hate the pathway that you've taken and the person you've become, then you're going to be completely depressed because you think that, oh, this, if I hit that reward, if I hit that level, then I'll be happy. Well, technically, I think of self-actualization, I think the journey, right, is the reward, right? The
absolutely.
person you're becoming. The byproduct of that is the money, right? And the byproduct is the car that you drive and the girl you get and the house you live in. But the moment you've self-actualized, the path you're on is the reward, right? So you have a simple path to self-actualize. And is there any one, two, or three steps you could share with our audience?
Well, yeah. I just think doing these things, like you said, it's the journey. It's not the destination. Jim Carrey had this great quote about, like, I hope everybody gets fame and fortune, all those things, so they can realize that's not what they really wanted. That didn't really satisfy them. It's the person, like you say, that you become in the meantime, and I like, there's a lot of ways to think about that, but like you said about the girl, or to find love, and we're all looking for love. And Rumi said, it's not, don't go out and search for love. Find within yourself all the barriers you have to love, and break those down. Recognize those and break those down. That's the kind of thing. It's not like find the person that you want to be with for the rest of your life. Become the person you want to be with for the rest of your life, and you will
Boom.
attract the people like that to you. And so that's what it is. And being an entrepreneur, the millionaire mindset essentially boils down to, and it's in my book, is that, just start right now with, if you had all the money, if you had what would you be doing? What kind of person would you be? You know, would you, be slim and cool like David Beckham and wearing sharp clothes? Well, you can kind of do that now, go out and run and do whatever, don't eat that, quart of ice cream, go and have a salad, whatever, kind of things. Like, don't wait until you have the money or something to see that that's the thing. Like, start living that way now. And like you say, you'll attract all those kind of things that, those are the side benefits, the consequences of being that person. Being that person, becoming the best you can be. And that's the only person to really compete with. It's not like, oh, that person has a fancier car, that person has a bigger house. It's like, am I better today than I was yesterday? And am I intentionally working on that role? Because the money is a lagging indicator. It's what you are doing now. The money will come later, and all the fame or whatever you want. If you're doing the things you need to do now, all that stuff will come. It's a lagging indicator, as they say in the stock market. It's not, that's the thing. And people get that backwards. Say, oh, if I only had $1 million, then I would, I'd be kicking it on the beach with, whatever. Go
That's a
take a
great way to put that, though. Money is always the lagging indicator. And people usually put that first and then they lose themselves in the process.
Right. And that's the key, is you have to, well, I think it's so important, like you said, to develop that moral compass, that pole star, that guiding light, that these are your criteria, and you're not going to falter or waver from that. And yeah, sort of compromise your integrity or your whatever to make a quick buck. That's really the key, to do things with integrity, and build character. That's our goal here. Our project in life is soul creation and building our character, and that comes through all of these type of these endeavors where, it's trial by fire. You really have to do things, if you want to do it, reading like, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, those kind of things, reading expands the amount of experiences you have. If you're just relying on your own personal experience, it's kind of limited. And that's why reading, I think, is so darn important to really learn from other people's experience, and people that have worked hard to codify those ideas. It's such an efficient and effective way to quickly accelerate our own development, our own self-actualization, and not just business books, but philosophy and things about art, so that we have a rich life and we're really, really living more than just saying this is my one goal and that's all it's going to be, kind of thing.
Well, you have something in your book here, and by the way, before I forget, I want to mention this quote. I love it, and I have not really heard it said it this way. But you can't change the destination overnight, but you can change the direction. God, I love that. And then there's one other piece here that I started really analyzing the schedule that I wanted in my life. What did I want my days to look like? And I started to build the schedule that I wanted throughout the week. Mondays, what they look like. Fridays, what they look. Saturdays. And it was wild to see how I started to move my business around my dream life rather than have my dream life around my business. And once I started to have that schedule in place, then I realized my habits. I started to realize, when did I want to wake up? When did I want to go to bed? What did I want to do every day? What was like the perfect average day? We did a book for somebody called that. And it made me think about, hey, if I get a run in and I ride and I make a couple sales and I grow the business, and the business is 1% further today than it was yesterday, that's a big win. I feel great.
And a
And I
good day.
and I learned something along the way. These are things that are all about habits that you stack up. And you have here something. Other steps will take habits, systems, and discipline to maintain. Some negative habits require to resolve to overcome through sternness or resolution and perseverance. Being free of their clutches and negative consequences is worth it. Some steps are ideal to strive towards. They are achievable, but will likely be more sustaining of modest approach for all, but for the most of, or but the most energetic of us. So whenever I read that, I was like, wow, when it comes down to analyzing the good habits and the bad habits. And if you understand the perfect day, you know the bad habits that take you away from it and the good habits that put you towards it. So, is that part of self-actualization?
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it, Mike. That's really excellent. And to take that type of approach, right? And then you see what's taking you away from your ideal and what's adding to it. And every moment. I mean, and it's all these micro actions that we take. Every moment we are either growing into something more or retreating into something less. I
Yep.
mean, we are every moment. So you can think, on a moment by moment basis, is this actually benefiting me or is this something that's diminishing me? And if and that's like mindfulness, right? Like if you be mindful of every moment, then you're really able to calibrate and dial that in. And when you have that perfect ideal day, then you have that compass, that ideal, that North Star that you're navigating by. And then you can see, is this helping me? Is this, hurting me? And
Yeah.
so that's really key.
Yeah, knowing where you want to go. And I've always asked this amongst our clients, hey, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Right? You have the long-term vision, but then you break it down by the week-to-week vision, right? So is this vision of yours that's next week, 2 weeks from now, getting you even a hair closer to the 5 or 10 year goal? So having vision, absolutely crucial. I've always said that in one of my first books, if not the first book, Vision, step one. And the further you could see out, the more beneficial. But regardless, your life is going to change. If you just have that clear definition of how you want to be remembered, that's going to lend favor. So, with every decision, every person you work with, every move you make in business, how you handle problems, and then who you allow into your world, right? So very, very crucial. Anyways, you have many books out there. Obviously, guys, if you just look them up, John Cousins, easy to find, 50 books. I think they're all on Amazon, right? All 50 books?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. So you can get them a Kindle, paperback, audiobook. Is there a website or a social media channel out there that people can find you on? Maybe get in touch with you.
Yeah. Well, my website is www.mba-asap.com. And that's where you can get in touch with me. my email is just John, John, at mba-asap.com. I'd love to hear from anybody. I have a jjcousins.com is my blog and my, post. So I have a number, and I have a community also around my courses and my books, MBA dash ASAP, uh, mba-asap.mn.co is the community where there's a lot of peer-to-peer kind of interaction and things. But yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody. And yeah, and one last thing I was saying about the long-term, short-term, we tend to really overestimate what we can do in a year, and we try to do too much and underestimate what we can do in a decade. So really playing the long game is key.
Man, that's huge. Yeah, I'm looking at your website here, and you have a phrase that I'm always sharing it, and you say, get smart without taking on the crippling debt, right? I think per business debt is good, right? You can leverage it, especially if you understand debt. You can have it, offset the cost, and then you basically you leverage it into buying income producing properties. But when you take on personal debt, you start to become short-sighted, right? You start to lose focus of the vision, the long game, and you start to only worry about the day-to-day expenses. And I think that what you're saying here is avoid that. And yes, debt is definitely a tool, but if you can play this game freely and have maybe your business take on the debt rather than you could play the real game of wealth creation. So is that some of your messaging within this
Absolutely.
course?
Absolutely. Yeah. Get off that hamster wheel and yeah, start living. Yeah.
Wow. Guys, go to his website. Very well done. MBA-ASAP, ASAP.com. You can find his books on there, merchandise, and you can enroll for his course. So I will to say, John Cousins, next time you write a book, you got to come back on. Every time you put about out a book, let us know. Come back on. We'll talk
You
more
bet.
about wealth creation. Okay.
You bet, Mike. It's been really a pleasure. Really a pleasure. I
Yeah.
loved it.
Thanks so much for being here. Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.